And now, a word from our sponsor. Ayaya songs are about our histories. Ayaya is an Inuit-owned firm that tells our stories in many languages across Canada. They are experts in publishing children's books, usually in syllabics, and they do large multi-language projects like the reports of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. If you need help getting your stories into classrooms or homes in Cree, Inuktitut, or other Indigenous languages, check them out at ayaya.ca. That's ayaya.ca. Ayaya is a proud sponsor of the Roots and Hoots podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Roots and Hoots, a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Since 2020, we have been gathering, laughing, learning hard truths, and sharing in community conversations with Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Each episode, we learn something new, and we're excited to be sharing this journey with you. Roots and Hoots is about connecting with and celebrating Indigenous peoples' contributions to their fields of study, work, and cultures. We also speak with allies who share how they are furthering the work of reconciliation in Canada. To learn more about the Legacy of Hope Foundation and the work that we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Roots and Hoots. On this week's episode, host Gordon is in studio with former NHL player John Chabot. John is generous in sharing stories of his time in the NHL and playing hockey in Europe. He talks about the many great opportunities that sports presented and why sharing this message with Indigenous youth across the country is so important to him. John may have retired from hockey many years ago, but he has been busy working with APTN as a host and hockey analyst and building important opportunities through the NHL Indigenous Alumni team and through the national charity he founded, First Assist. Please enjoy this special episode of Roots and Hoots.
Hello and welcome to Roots and Hoots podcast. I'm with John Chabot today, and he's my guest. And let's have a little chat with John, see how he's going. John, maybe just start by telling us a little bit about where you come from and your family background.
Okay, well, I'm Kitigan Zibi First Nation, Algonquin, Anishinabeg. My dad was born and raised as my mom was. She was born in the town of Maniwaki. My dad was born on the res and learned only his language. Had only his language till he was 9. Eventually went to the school in town, learned English and then French, and moved away when he was 19 to join the forces, the service. And from that, we lived all over Canada. I was born in Summerside, PEI. My brothers and sisters in Portage la Prairie, Cold Lake, Alberta. There was one born in North Bay. So we kind of we run across the country. Got back pretty well every summer to see my grandma. In Kitigan Zibi. But yeah, that kind of the history of the family, and everybody's kind of everywhere. We have some in Ottawa, we have some in Toronto. So we're here and there.
I did meet some of your brothers and sisters a while back. I don't know where they are now, but I wanted to ask you, do you speak like your native language, Algonquin language, right?
Yes. No, I don't. I don't at all. One of the things I find the story behind that is when my mom was French, so she was, her job or what they had discussed was she would teach the kids French and my dad would teach us Algonquin. But it never turned out. So I spoke French and I do speak French, but my dad never. It would have been an interesting way to learn, just being spoken to and having just pick it up like that. Something you'd never forget, because I learned French when I was a kid, and when I came back to the province of Quebec at 12, I could, within a short period of time, I was speaking the language with my friends, and I never understood why it came to me so quickly. My mom said it was my primary language as a kid, because that's what she spoke to me pretty well all the time. So I was, it is my sisters. 2 of my sisters are in Algonquin classes in KZ. They drive up for it weekly. We've tried to pick it up. Indigenous language are tough, and they're, so it's been beyond our grasp at this point.
Kitigan Zibi, also known as Maniwaki. Is Kitigan Zibi the reserve and Maniwaki is the town?
It is. It is. Yeah, Maniwaki literally sits on the border. Really? And actually there's parts of our land that are incorporated that they took into the town. And parts of our community that kind of sit around the town on both different areas that where the town has, as with most communities, we've got an area where we come down our band office, and then beyond our band office, there's 4 or 5 houses that are not Indigenous. They were owned by non-Indigenous people, and they've continued to be that. We just kind of build around it. And then you go into town, you drive into town, all of a sudden you turn to your right, and you're in part of the reserve. that we've kind of taken back, and there's housing there, and they're administered by the band. So,
Wow.
like most communities that are surrounded by towns, there was a lot of different circumstances arose over the years.
Yeah. We won't get into that. That's probably quite
That'll be a long
story,
conversation.
yeah. So your dad speaks it, right?
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Your dad-
fluently. Like
yeah.
he'd come home and speak to my mom until the day he died. I mean, he would make every effort to speak the language with
Yeah.
whoever he could.
And your reserve, I mean, what percentage of the reserve do you think speaks
It's
it?
getting better.
It's getting better.
Yeah, I know that one of the things that they've tried to do, like in most communities, is a lot of the elders, Indigenous speakers of a certain age are going to the primary schools and the kindergartens, and it's all they speak to the kids completely in Algonquin.
Wow.
And a lot of these kids are growing up. So now the language has I can't say resurfaced, but there's been an interest and a huge effort in teaching it to the kids, because a lot of the idioms, as you know, if they're not taught, they just kind of disappear over the years. So our elders who understand the different dialects and the ways and the idioms, they can teach that to the youth now, and they can carry that forward, which is really nice.
Yeah. Algonquin comes from my language. Actually, my Cree comes from the Algonquin language.
Yeah.
So I sometimes when I do get an opportunity to hear people talk in Algonquin, which is kind of rare for this area, and I can pick up, I can pick up some words here and there.
My dad used to say he could go to Mi'kmaq territory, he could go to the Cree territories in the west, and he could understand at both, not completely all the time, but there was always words and phrases that he could understand and participate in the Indigenous language, even though he wasn't a Cree, he didn't speak Cree, and he didn't speak the other Indigenous languages.
I had the fortunate opportunity to meet your father years ago when I was working at the Ottawa Friendship Center. But I don't think I think your mother was there too. But I kind of see this image of this woman beside your dad.
Yeah.
But I just spoke mainly to your dad.
Yeah, and that was the case. I mean, my mom they were together, and my dad would do the visits to the Ottawa, and mom would invariably be with them. Like, not very often did he go on his own. So you probably did peripherally meet my mom, and like I said, you did get a chance to talk to my dad.
Yeah. When and where did you start playing hockey? You're a professional hockey player at one time.
Yeah, long time ago.
And when did you start playing hockey? When you started playing hockey, when did you felt you got the calling to be a hockey player?
You know what? I tell this story recently, and it's a different time. And I started playing hockey as a young kid. I was 3 years old, and my dad tells a story of taking me to the rink in Cold Lake, Alberta, and putting me on the ice, and I fell down. Or actually, it was in North Bay, Ontario, before we went to Cold Lake. And I fell down, I started crying, and didn't want to go back on the ice. So a full year passed that he didn't put me on the ice. The next year, he brought me back again. I was 4 years old, put me on the ice, and I could skate. And he said from that point on, I just skated. Yeah. And then in Cold Lake, we moved there for a number of years, and he put together a backyard rink, and I skated on that every day. Yeah. Which kind of gave me, I don't think you can call it a calling, it just gave me a love. I think that any player who plays at a high level, there's a love of the sport that you just want to do that just grabs you. And I had that at a very, very young age. And, people asked, did you know at 12 that you were going to play in the NHL? I said, I didn't know until I was 17. Yeah. I played hockey, and I was a pretty good hockey player. When I turned 15, 16, I became a very good hockey player. And then I was drafted high into the major junior levels. And the next year I was drafted in the NHL. And not until that point did I really believe that I could play in the NHL. So I was 17 years old before I actually, I knew I loved the sport. I knew that it was something I wanted to do. But to do it at that level, with the realization, it was not until later. And then but you look at it, and I prepared for it my whole life. I played hockey. Yeah. Like I tell kids, I retired when I was 39 years old from pro sports. Yeah. And I look at the amount of time I spent on the ice every day, averaged out. It was probably at least an hour a day from the age of 4 years old till I retired. Wow. And because some days I'd be on the ice 6 hours a day because I'd be skating in my backyard, and some days, very rarely, would I not be on the ice. Yeah. But, during the regular season as a professional athlete, you're on the ice every day. There's no days off. You might get 1 day off a month. Yeah. So you're on the ice every day. And so it all adds up. And now they're more attuned to the human body. and what fatigue can do.
Yeah.
They try and make sure that you're capable of playing the game, not so much practicing, because the game is more important. So they give more days off.
Right.
When they travel, the next day is a day off. Back when we'd fly home at 6 in the morning, we'd drive at 8, we'd go to the rink and practice. So the fatigue factor was never really factored in. So we skated all of. They felt if you missed a day of practice, you weren't going to be ready the next day.
Wow.
And that's where the new way of thinking has come in. The way they train their bodies, the way they prepare mentally, the way they prepare physically. It's not always having to be on the ice, because our bodies are tuned and have done it for so long that you can miss a day or two and still perform at a high level.
Yeah. You traveled all over the world playing professional hockey, as well as assistant coaching. Of the 3 NHL teams you played for, is there a special place you enjoyed the most? Like you played where? Pittsburgh, Montreal, and what was the other one? Detroit, yeah. They're
all different. I mean, you look at Montreal as my first NHL game.
Yeah.
I got to play against New York Islanders, my friend, score a goal and an assist. And so that is always going to be special, playing for the Habs. Even as a young guy, I wasn't a Montreal Canadiens fan growing up. I was a big Chicago Blackhawk fan. So when I actually got drafted by Montreal, I wasn't like overjoyed, because at the time it was like I was kind of like, why Montreal? But of all the teams that could have drafted me, there was a team I really didn't think would, even though, at the time I look back and, they were looking for a tall, playmaking, French-speaking, which I was, centerman that could play with Guy Lafleur. That was what they were looking for.
Yeah.
And so they drafted me because I loved to pass the puck. And so it ended up being, a really good fit for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the place that I really wanted to go. So Montreal, because of, I still say Montreal is the place. If you want to really be part of hockey culture, like culture for what it is, hockey, Montreal, you have to play Montreal for a year.
Right.
Like people say Toronto. Toronto, it's just it's different.
Yeah.
Like Montreal fans, Montreal culture, the passion that there's a passion to the sport, and there can be a stupidity attached to the passion of the sport. And I think that's where fans get mixed up. Montreal has some overbearing fans, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But they do understand, and they are a little, there's a passion to the sport that you don't get anywhere else. Like it's almost like, I'm not a religious guy, but I believe that some people have a religious passion that transfers over to the sport of hockey in that province.
Yeah.
When Quebec and Montreal we had our wars, and literally they were wars back in the day, there was a huge divide in the province.
Really?
That's never happened. I think Rick Natras played, and he said the Calgary Edmonton for viciousness that was on par, if not a bit more vicious, but it didn't separate a province like the province of Quebec when the Nordiques were in. It literally separated families.
Really?
And so, I would say if anybody wants to really play 1 year of where you are completely engulfed in the sport of hockey for the right reasons, I say play in Montreal for a year. But then you go to Pitt, and 2 of my children were born in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so it holds a completely different allure. And it wasn't a good hockey town. It was a really good sports town when we got there. They had the Steelers that were doing great. The Pirates were doing really well.
Yeah.
And so, there was 4 professional sports, and we were the 5th. Like we were literally playing college football.
Really?
And so we weren't big. And then by the time I left to go to Detroit, they had taken a little more of a foothold. Mario was there. And the hockey was starting to be, a sport that was on the rise.
Right, okay.
And then I went to Detroit, which another original 6 team, and it was outstanding. Mm-hmm. And for completely different reasons, we got to live in a hockey culture that was like Montreal's, but when hockey was over, they had baseball, and then they had basketball, and they had football. Jeez. So you could go to different sports, and you weren't the focal point. Yeah. And Montreal's hockey was all they had, so that was what was interesting. But so for every city was great in a completely different way.
Yeah.
But, for me, and like I said, I'm not a Montreal Canadiens fan. I never have been. I do understand and believe that is the premier place to play hockey in that world of sport. If you want to feel what it's like to be a hockey player, go play in Montreal for a year.
You played in. You talk about Montreal, and you played with Guy Lafleur. What was Guy Lafleur like? I mean,
awesome.
I was. I heard an interview being done about him. I think it was a general manager or coach. He said Guy Lafleur would come to the rink about an hour before the game.
More than that.
And just hang around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We would get to the rink, like, we would play at 7:30. You'd get there at 5. He'd already been there at 3 o'clock.
Really?
And he was already half dressed.
Oh my goodness.
So you get there at 5, he'd be good to go. Like Guy's life was hockey. He loved hockey. He loved everything about hockey.
Yeah.
He didn't love the bullet that goes on beside the game.
Yeah.
Like he loved the boys. He loved being one of the boys. He loved the game. He loved preparing for the game.
Mm-hmm.
He loved competing in the game. He loved to win.
Yeah.
He loved to score goals.
He sure did.
You know, and he was everything you wanted in a good teammate.
Yeah.
And the thing about the Canadians is they had so much success that it would pass down from generation to generation. So Flower learned from Beliveau, who learned from Richard, who learned from Doug Harvey. You know, so that was decades of winning hockey. And so that was passed down to my generation. And, you know, my generation won a cup in 86 and then 93, but it's been that long. So it's not that, you know, that old adage that we had of the Canadians were that winning franchise. It's kind of gone away. But I was joining a team that had won, you know, 4 in a row.
Yeah.
And the Robinsons were still there, who's still a good friend. And Flower was still there. And Steve Schutt was still there. And all those, Bob Gainey, all the Hall of Famers were still there. And so I got to learn. And that was, you know, one of the, you know, you look back, one of the blessings of my career was I got to play a year with, you know, 6 Hall of Fame hockey players on the same team. And I played with Hall of Famers like Steve Yzerman and Mary Lemieux and all those guys, you know, and Bertie Federico. But these guys were Stanley Cup winners and just passed knowledge down.
Yeah.
And it was an unbelievably great experience for a young 19-year-old Indigenous hockey player to be able to play in the mecca of the sport for a year and a half with these guys that their mantra was, from failing hands we throw the torch. So they knew they were getting old. It was up to us to carry that torch.
Right.
And what they did was they gave us the knowledge on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They said, here's how we do it. Here's how we've done it in the past. We're going to tell you how to live your life. We're going to give you blueprint and guidelines, but it's up to you to do it.
Yeah.
And this is they've been the model franchise for a long time because of that. You know, they treat their alumni well. They treat their players well. They treat their fans well. They're, you know, it is an unbelievable experience to play in Montreal.
Like of hockey. Eh?
Yeah.
Did you ever win a cup?
Unfortunately, no.
You just kind of.
Yeah, Stanley. I went to the semifinals 4 times.
Yeah.
With Montreal my first year, Detroit a couple of times, but we never did. You know, and getting to the semifinals is an unbelievable feeling. Imagine just getting to the finals with the only 2 teams, and then, you know, the team that wins, and it must be like, you know, I still talk to guys like those guys that played in Montreal that won cups before I did, even the guys that after. There's a bond that they have that I'll never understand because they win together, live together. You know, you're always together. You always have that bond that's going to carry you back together. And you can see it. We go to outings with, you know, Serge Savard and Larry Robinson and Bob Gainey, and they just gravitate towards each other. They just talk and they tell stories and they laugh. And you can just see there's a bond that you just don't have unless you win a cup.
Mm-hmm. You also played hockey in Europe.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Unreal. Great.
Really? Yeah.
When I left Detroit after 9 years of playing, hockey had become a job, and it is a job. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
paid for it.
They get paid for it. It is a job, but you play it because you love it.
Yeah.
And I always said that when I was growing up, when I became a pro, and I said to people around me that if hockey ever became a job, I was going to quit. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I was in Detroit, and we were in transition. We had a good team for a couple of years, and then the team was kind of going down. Made a couple bad deals, traded Adam Oates and traded some guys that, you know, thinking that they would help lift the team, but it did the exact opposite. So changed management, and the new manager came in and it didn't really see eye to eye. They wanted to make changes, and I was one of the changes they wanted to make. And it wasn't fun. My last year in Detroit wasn't an easy season, wasn't a fun season. And so we decided to go to Europe, and it saved my hockey career. Yeah. I mean, playing in Europe it made me enjoy the game for the game again. It wasn't a job anymore. It was fun. It was going to the rink every day was fun. And we had good teams, but we also, you know, Europeans consider hockey a hobby sport. You got paid well, but it wasn't soccer. It wasn't like football over there. Yeah. Football was their passion. Even though they impressed upon every player that when the game was over, when practice was over, you left the sport at the rink and you went home to your family. And soccer's no different. When the practice was over and you prepared for your game, you went back home and it was family time.
Yeah.
And that's what I love so much about being in Europe. They understood and they wanted you not to carry the game home with you. Live a life.
Yeah.
And so for almost 11 years, I got to do that. I got to be a full-time dad.
Yeah.
I got to drive my kids to school. I got to go to their plays. I got to be part of their choirs. I got to go to daughter dances with my 2 daughters. I got to be at my son's hockey games and travel with his team. So it gave me a love for the game that had been misplaced for a year or two at the end of my NHL career. So I got to, like I tell people, I got paid to see the world. We stayed there 11 and a half months a year. If I played in Milan, everybody went home. We lived in our apartment and we go to Switzerland. One weekend we'd go to Czechoslovakia. One weekend we'd go to Paris. We went to countries and cities that my kids never would have had a chance to see if we never had left, if we never took a chance on going to Europe. So, my kids now can travel anywhere because that's what we did.
Yeah.
Like we would literally take my kids out of school on lunch on Friday afternoon with the blessing of their teachers and say, we're going to travel. We're going to go to the train station, and we'd show up and we'd look at the train station and we said, oh, that's where we're going. And we'd jump on a train and we'd go to Lucerne or we'd go to Zell-am-Zee in Austria or Vienna. Yeah. And we'd jump on a overnight train, and we'd get there in the morning or we'd get there late at night. We didn't even have a hotel. We'd show up, get a hotel room for 2 nights. Yeah. Sunday night, we'd jump on the overnight train. The kids would arrive at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd get in the car, drive them to school, and they'd go to school for the week. We did that every weekend. Wow. So they got to learn all these cultures and open up their hearts and open up their minds to change. And it was unreal. It was we didn't think of it. And at one time, my daughter, she gave me a plaque, and it said, thanks for teaching me to jump without a net. Yeah. Which is what you want your kids to see. You want them to be able to experience the world and life without blinders. Yeah. Just accept. Yeah. And I think in today's world, there's so much division, and there's so much division, but there's not, because there's so many like-minded people out there. Europeans are very much like that, and a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans are too. Yeah. Where they see the world as a place to explore. Yeah. And this is what I feel my wife and I gave our kids by going to Europe. The ability to see life as a way to explore. Life is never going to knock you down. It's another opportunity to do something else. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. It really is. And my kids they're great, and they're very open and understanding, which is awesome. How many cities did you live in Europe? Just 3. Just 3? I lived in Milan, Berlin, and Frankfurt. But I lived on the outskirts of all of them. Yeah. Like in Milan, I lived in Pieve Manuel, which is from downtown Milan, probably about 25 minutes, a little suburb. Yeah. And from there, we could get to Switzerland in 40 minutes. We could get to... By driving? Yeah. Oh, the highway, just boom there. Wow. It was a joke when I played in Italy, because like I said, it brought back the joy. So we would bus to a lot of our games on a Friday or a Sunday, usually on a Friday, at 1 o'clock, or on a Sunday we'd leave, and the joke was, where's John coming from this time? A lot of times I would take the kids, we'd go have breakfast in Switzerland. We'd go to what's the name of the town? Well, I can't even think of it, but it was just over the border, Como. Or Lugano, and then we'd have breakfast, a nice big breakfast. I'd come back, I'd show up for the 1 o'clock bus at 10 to 1. Hey, where'd you go today? I went to Como for breakfast. And they would just laugh, and I'd get on the bus and I'd go. But being in Europe was so like at one point in time I was living in Frankfurt. I was in Vienna. My wife was in Paris with the high school art class. My son was in Brussels playing baseball. My daughter was in Belgium, and my other daughter was in England. And all of us were in 5 different countries on the same time, and that night we were all back home in Ottawa. And so it's just, you tell that story, and for somebody who, they come over here, like my daughter had a boyfriend, he looked at that, he goes, oh, let's just bike to the sandbanks from Ottawa. And she goes, this isn't England. You're not looking at a map that's the size of your hand. You can do it in an hour. Yeah. You're looking at a 7, 8, 9, 10, 12-hour bike. He goes, oh, no. So we showed him, no, this is not, so then we drove there. He goes, oh yeah, maybe we should, I'm glad we didn't bike here. But I mean, that's England though. You can, that's Europe. You can get to different countries in a matter of an hour or two, and different culture and different languages and different food. It was a really good experience.
Mm-hmm.
The Legacy of Hope Foundation has produced 30 exhibitions that shed light on Indigenous history. Exhibitions are mobile, standalone, and provide a unique museum-like experience that include first-hand Indigenous testimonies of the residential school system and 60 Scoop. The exhibitions promote healing and encourage acts of reconciliation. They can be hosted in schools, offices, parliaments, galleries, or any public space across Canada. To learn more about our exhibitions and borrowing, please contact our exhibitions department at exhibitions@legacyofhope.ca.
You were part of the creation of the NHL Indigenous Alumni team. Who are some of the players on that team, and what was the reception like when traveling to the communities?
Oh, it's been awesome. We've had Brian Trottier, Reggie Leach, Jamie Leach, Aaron Asham, Cody McCormick, Teddy Nolan, Brandon Nolan, myself, Dan Frawley. We've had some of our PWHL Indigenous ladies who've retired, like Victoria Bach and Jocelyn Larocque, Jamie Livatre. They all travel with us to communities, and it's not just about hockey. Like what we try and do is like we have so many guys that played. We have every year there's 10 Indigenous guys in the NHL. When I played, there was a Gino Ojix, there was myself, there was what's his name, who just finished coaching in Toronto. So we just try and highlight to kids that you look at the Connor McDavids, there's also a Brian Trottier who's a top 100 player of all time. So we let the kids know that we've been involved in high-level sports athletics achievement for a long time. So we go to the school, we talk to the kids, we tell our stories about overcoming, about the racism, about how we were treated, some of the things that were said to us, but then also celebrating the fact that we got there and that we do an on-ice clinic with the kids, then we do a game, then we do a community feast. We try and make it a full day so the community gets a chance to see people that they just saw on TV. Aaron Asham, who's a Métis from Portage la Prairie, great guy. Cody McCormick, who's from Mississauga of the Thames, great guy. Jamie Leach, great guy. Dan Frawley, Nipissing First Nation, great guy. Danny Hodson, out west, living in Toronto, great guy. These guys are all guys that played, whether they be 3 games or 300 games or 1,000 games in the NHL. And we just highlight to the kids. And it started back in, we always did a couple things. Dan Frawley did a couple things. I was hired to do a couple things. But after I finished, I think, coaching in New York, Reggie had just been asked to do a game in Akwesasne by the casino. And he just said, we got to organize this better. And so he called me, he said, do you want to do this? And I said, just send me the names, I'll do it. So 2015-ish, we got together as a group and I just started making calls. In fact, we have a game this summer in Ottawa. Our Indigenous NHL alumni team's going to play against the Ottawa Senators alumni on July 3rd at Jim Poplinski Arena for the Ayabe Indigenous Youth Hockey Tournament. And so the game's at 6 o'clock. There'll be an opening ceremony. But we'll have like Aaron Asham be there. Cody's going to be there. I'm going to be there. We'll have Victoria Bach. We'll have a couple of guys from Shoresy. Indigenous guy, Andrew Ansana, who plays Goody. We'll have Jonathan Dyby, who plays Dolo. He's part of First Assist. On their team, we'll have Mark Mathot, Grant Clitsum, Jesse Winchester, Scott Greenham. So we have a bunch of guys that are going out to play. So it's going to be a fun game to highlight the sport of hockey. And afterwards, we'll sign autographs and do pictures. But this is kind of what we want to do. We want to make sure that kids today understand that, there's achievement happening now, but we've always been achieving. And whether, like, we bring educators with us, people who've graduated with degree, with either doctors or lawyers. They come with us at time to talk to kids about, there's a sport, but you can use sport, like, say, Devin Buffalo is going to be our goalie. Devin played NCAA hockey. He's now a lawyer, but he still plays hockey in tournaments. He's going to come be our goalie in this tournament because he's achieved. He's achieved in hockey, but he's also achieved in education. And these are things that kids need to hear, that you can use a sport as a tool. Use it to get an education. Like we have kids in Ottawa that have gone to school, Indigenous kids have gone to prep schools in the States and now are at NCAA schools, and using that, there's more and more kids using that avenue now because because of the Indian Act, good and bad, we are if you're not going to a private institution, they'll pay for a state-sponsored school. They'll pay to send you to Michigan State. They'll send us for Vermont State. So you can get your funding if you're a good enough hockey player or athlete, doesn't mean hockey player, to get an education. And, prep schools are part of that, part and parcel of that. So those are things we try and tell the kids. Don't limit yourself to where you are. I tell the kids, I was born and lived in small areas, small towns across the country, but that didn't stop me from seeing the world because I could skate past and shoot. And they are no different, These kids have dreams. And sometimes they don't understand how to get there. Okay, as an Indigenous alumni team, we're gonna give you a pathway that you can use, whether you're an athlete or you're or you're a student, how to get to where you want to go, and we'll be there to answer questions. So that's kind of what it's not just about hockey; it's about life.
Right. First Assist is a national charity you founded for youth. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Can you please tell us more about it and the important work that you do with the youth?
I when I stopped playing hockey, like every other professional athlete, you're kind of trying to figure out, like, your love has been hockey.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to figure out what else can I do with me? What else can, you don't know, because you've identified with being this. And I always, when people ask me, I always go back, of all people, I go back to a quote and an article in Sports Illustrated magazine by Charles Barkley. And there's a bunch of basketball, football, hockey players, because Atlanta had an NHL team a couple of times. They would all congregate at this bar, and during the day, every day, and they would shoot the shit and laugh and throw darts and play some pool. And then when Barkley was in town, he would go there. And so Sports Illustrated went and did a story on this, on the players. They're kind of stuck, and they asked Barkley, how come you achieved? How come you got to get away? Yeah. And as a professional athlete, you're always about yourself. You are always thinking about the night before a game, how do I get ready? I can't do this. You never worry about your family. That's what your wife does. Your wife, fortunately, my wife is great. She's took care. She raised my kids, because I was so single-minded in what I wanted to do to be successful as a player. Everything else was secondary. Right. But you leave the sport, and all of a sudden your lifeline isn't there. And so they asked Charles Barkley how come he was able to escape. And he goes, when you leave the sport, it's the toughest thing you're ever going to do. But one mindset you have to approach life is, especially after being a professional athlete and thinking about yourself forever, is I've got to do something that's bigger than me. So something outside of what makes you comfort, somewhere outside of John Chabot being a hockey player. What is that? So I use that. What can I do that's bigger than me? And one of the things we try to use was sport and hockey. So I started traveling and doing hockey clinics, and did that for a number of years. My son Kyle and I traveled all across the country. But at one point in time, he's turned to me. We had gone to Fort Good Hope in NWT. Fort Good Hope and Delaney are sister communities, almost like Pikwaugan and Casey, where they're close. They're Algonquin, the same people, different issues in each community. Well, in Delaney and Fort Good Hope, it was like night and day. Okay. Delaney was forward-moving, great volunteer, really good leadership. Good Hope was struggling hard. There was gang violence, there was abuse issues, there was everything that we were trying to overcome. And Delaney, same people, relatives in each, they were great, and they were kind of my model community. So,
why is that?
So we went there, and we tried to figure. It was leadership. And so the people in Delaney, or from an early time, the leadership implemented volunteer. Like, volunteer to help. How can you make our community better? So you volunteered, you were lauded, you were pat on the back. They created a relationship between elders and youth. The elders would take the youth on the land to show them how to hunt fish, but the elders would show up in the kids' lives, especially the kids were single parents, and they were male elders. They had single parents, and they would be the father figure, and they would dispense. So they created a relationship that helped the community stay strong from the bottom to the top and from the top to the bottom. Well, they didn't have the same issues, the same programs or same attitude in Good Hope. And so we went there one time, and we'd gone there and we had a program. It went really, really, really well. And so we were there for 6 or 7 days. We're leaving, and we said, okay, we're coming back, because we were really excited to be in this community. And one of the kids said, nobody ever comes back here. And I said, no, we're going to come back. So we came back a month later, and the kid literally was like, he was like beyond surprised that we showed up again. Yeah. So we started a program, and we were there. They hired a girl. So he got to the rink, and let me tell you how bad it was in Good Hope, where they separated the community down the middle, Bloods and Crips. And if somebody crossed the other side, even if you were a person who didn't know what was going on,
these were two gangs?
Exactly, and they would beat each other with hockey sticks.
Oh my goodness. So
they get into the arena, and we said, no colors here.
Yeah.
So these kids had been friends growing up, but all of a sudden they were living in this area, so they became part of these two gangs that they saw on a computer. Yeah. So they came to the rink, and it was colors off. They were great friends. They were hugging and laughing. As soon as they left the rink, they didn't even look at each other. They went in their own direction. Wow. So the rink became like an area of safety. So we figured we got to do so. We left the community, and my son said to me, he goes, it's got to be more than just about hockey. Yeah. And that was like 2007, 2008. So we started going to school and started incorporating the school into our programming, and started to use the sport as a device to get kids back to get an education, back to school, and as a way to entice kids to get back and to talk about it while in the school, and to use the teachers who were all very agreeable to helping out as ways to use the sport. Help these kids move forward. Yeah. So move on to today, 2012, we take the NHL players through Yellowknife. There was a big lockout that season. So we took them to Yellowknife, and then we took them to Delaney, we took them to Inuvik, we took them to Whitehorse, and we raised a bunch of money. And we thought we can start using this. So we kept doing the work, kept traveling, kept going to the schools. And one of the good things through the pandemic, because we had so much extra time, is we had time to apply for our charity, a charity status. And so we got our charity status. A guy who was working with us at the time, Brent Kissel, applied. His dad he knew everything to do. So within 4 months, we became a charity. Yeah. And because of that, we are now in 5 or 6 communities across the country where we don't want to be beyond 10 or 15. We got to make sure that we are doing the right work at the right time. But the right work is using the sport to get the kids back to school, both educationally, culturally, to give them a chance to make an informed decision on their lives when they turn 18 and 19, and not be told what to do, but can make that decision to do what they think is right for them. Yeah. And this is what First Assist is based on. It's an education first initiative that uses sports to engage kids, to get them back to school, to get an education. And yes, you might be able to use hockey to go to an NCAA school. You might be able to use it to become a pro hockey player. But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking at helping communities raise well-rounded youth that can use the sport when needed, but also have an education to bring back what they learn outside, whether they choose to come back or not. And invariably they do, as you know, we all go home at some point in time to bring what we've got back to our communities, to bring that back, to show the next generation, here's what it takes to succeed. And this is what First Assist wants to do.
Awesome. You worked with APTN, the Aboriginal People's Television Network, over the years to develop TV program for sports. Tell us a bit about how this came about and the impact it's had on Hit the Ice for Indigenous players, youth, I guess.
Yeah, it was been awesome. I mean, I guess contact in 2003, I think, or 2004 for a show called Hockey Goals. And there was a guy named Rock Brunet, and Rock has since moved away from media, but he started the show. So we did 13 episodes where we would teach the basics of sport, how to stand, how to stride. It was all on APTN, showing the kids, the basics, how to learn how to skate. Yep. But then we do a diet part, we do a little bit of a cultural part. So it was a half-hour show that was geared around hockey, but also a little bit around everything to make you not a better person, but a healthier person. Yeah. So that ran for a couple of years. Then we did it in French. And then we did a show called Lacrosse Goals, which is geared around different sport, but in different communities that were geared towards lacrosse was a sport of choice. Yep. So after that, a gentleman named Jason Brennan was just graduating from Algonquin at the time, Algonquin College. And he was a little bit of everything on Hockey Goals. He came in, helped write some programs, helped write some shows, but also made sure the show ran well, made sure the producer had what he needed. And when Rock Brunet took a step away, Jason kind of stepped in and we created Niche Media. So through Niche Media, Jason's been able to, do movies. Did some really good movies, some really good shows, been nominated for awards. But he's also done documentaries, and so we had talked about doing a show called, a kind of a hockey-based reality TV show for Indigenous youth. So Jason went back and wrote it, pitched it, got it accepted by ATP, and out of it came Hit the Ice.
Yeah.
So Hit the Ice was a reality TV where we go scout kids, 23 to 30 kids, bring them to either Ottawa, Montreal, or Winnipeg, depending where we were filming that year. And we would run through a 2 to 3 week training camp that was an NHL major junior type camp where we were on the ice a couple times a day, nutrition, learning how to cook, cultural events, but also about creating friendships for these kids from across the country. So when they went somewhere, they always had somebody they could know, they could talk to about their experience. So it was a shared experience. And through that, we had kids that had been drafted, like Brady Keeper, who played a little bit in Florida, in Montreal, and in Vancouver. He came from that show. We had kids that were drafted, that got tryouts, kids that played major junior. We have a really good story out of a kid out of Thunder Bay. And the whole show was, again, geared around giving kids a second opportunity, kids that had fallen through the cracks, give them a chance to have a second kick at the can, using the sport as a way to get an education. Well, there's one young boy, and his name escapes me, unfortunately. I saw him, we were doing another show called A Good Game in Thunder Bay, and he was back in the community. And we talked about his time on Hit the Ice. He said he went to Hit the Ice. He was a AA player at the time. He had nowhere to play the next year, nowhere. So he came to our camp. We had the first 5 days as a tryout, and the last 2 weeks is the actual show. So this is all filmed. Mm-hmm. So last day comes up, and he's literally on the fence. It's either between him and another player. Yeah. He has a great game, scores a couple, does a couple. So we take him. Mm-hmm. So then he plays again. He's one of our weaker players, but he gets better every day. By the end of the show, we have a game. He plays really well in both games that we have. He gets noticed by a Tier 2 team, so a Junior A team, goes to play Junior A for a couple years. Mm-hmm. From that, he gets an invite to play CIS hockey, I think in Nipissing, gets an education, and now he's back in his community. He's a welfare worker. He's a health education guy. So, I mean, it's exactly what we want. This kid wasn't going anywhere at 16 because he'd fallen through the cracks. 8 years later, he's in his community, being a facilitator and for health and education and sport, which was fantastic. So this is kind of what we did. And then the last one was A Good Game. A Good Game was a really interesting take on the sport in that it wasn't necessarily about the sport, but it was about how the sport helped individuals and communities move forward. So we were in Podladek, Nova Scotia on Cape Breton Island. They back in the day in the 60s, 50s, and 40s. They made hockey sticks for NHL players, not just any, but players. So they made like hundreds and hundreds of sticks a year by hand that these hockey players buy, and so they used them and they filed them down. By the end, they were filing them down. They were finding trees, and this goes back centuries. So we went there, and we filmed the show on how they were reintroducing that culture back into their community. So this is a way how these kids and this community used hockey to move forward from where they were in the past to where they are today. Yeah. You know, we filmed one show in Istanbul where a young Navajo had used sport to go to get an education at Yale University, then had gone to coach hockey in Serbia. And Serbia was a war-torn country where these kids had to walk through a gravesite to get to the rink every day. But now they were performing or playing in the Division III World Championships at the junior level. Mm-hmm. So we went there he hadn't been there through the pandemic. So we went there to see the reunion between this young Navajo who went there to coach hockey and these young hockey players who were just loved the sport and who were playing at a level they never thought they could. So this is what A Good Game was, just an interesting take on how Indigenous people use the sport of hockey to move forward. You know, in northern Alberta, there was a rink that was in the middle of a river that everybody came to play at night. It was in the community, but it was on the river, and they had set up with lights, and they had a kilometer away that you could park and walk down to this rink, and we did a show on that. It was amazing, some of the things and areas that we got to see. It was such a good it's really unfortunate we never got picked up for a second season, because it was a really interesting, really, really good show on the sport. But it wasn't about the sport, it was the people around the sport and how they were trying to use it to better their community and better their own lives. It was really, really interesting.
So it's more than just hockey.
It was about life.
All kinds of
and how culture in the past and how they used hockey 100 years ago had permeated into today's sport and today's life.
You were one of the hosts of Hockey Night in Canada broadcasts in Cree. If I get,
but I don't speak Free.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, how did you do this? Like, how challenging this must have been. What was the general reception like when you did this? And you're an Algonquin, and doesn't speak Algonquin. You obviously don't speak Cree either.
No.
So how did you fit into this?
NHL. I had the experience, Indigenous guy. I'd done for the Olympics in 2010. I was their in-studio broadcaster for all hockey games, men and women.
Yeah.
And then through Doug Howe, who was at the time, we had done a couple other things for APTN, including hockey goals, including hit the ice, including a good game hadn't come in at the time. So when this show came up, they wanted to be legitimate. So the announcer, Earl Wood, had never done a hockey broadcast, had never done TV. Mm-hmm. Earl Wood, he was that. So then Clarence Irons, who was our play-by-play guy, was awesome. Yeah. He had never done anything like this, but he had done Indigenous tournaments out west. He'd done, the Nielsen tournament. He had done tournaments in Alberta, and he'd gone there and done them on the mic. And he was like Foster Hewitt.
Yes.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
And then we had Jason Chamakis, who had never done sport. He was a language guy. Yeah. And so the thing was, it was different than Hockey Night in Canada in that we were introducing the sport through the Cree language, and we're also teaching what a goalie equipment, the hockey pads, what a puck, how you set a puck in Cree. So it wasn't just for Indigenous. If they were non-Indigenous, they could learn words, but the sport was completely done in that. Not completely, I'd say 75 to 80%. Yeah. The 20% was me. So I would speak, and a lot of times either Earl, Clarence, or Jason would translate to Cree. Yeah. So it's still that to the very end. It took place. So we do our pregame analysis of the game. I would speak. Clarence would speak. Say pretty well the same thing, but not, because he had his own ideas also. Right. So then we do the play-by-play. I would do the color during the play, and he wouldn't translate then. It would just all be in English. So I got in there through Doug Howe, who was the producer, and had pitched this idea to Sportsnet for a long time, and they finally bought it. We did the first show, I think, in 2017. It was outstanding. Mm-hmm. Like it was out. Like we were there on Tuesday, and we did a couple games, and we were so bad. We were thinking, how is this gonna work? Like
this was
it was so bad.
This was on Hockey Night in Canada?
Yeah, but it's all run-throughs. They're all trials. They're all we were trying to get better. So we'd do a game a day. Yeah. And it was like we just couldn't find our footing. It was just everything was running, and it wasn't just us. It was APTN hadn't done live hockey before, so it was everybody was learning. Yeah. Within a 4 or 5 day period, we had to be good enough to put the national sport onto our national Indigenous broadcaster well enough that we wouldn't be laughed at. Our first game was Saturday night. We did a game in the morning, and we were like, oh, this is going to go so badly. We were all thinking the same thing. Yeah. The lights went on, the mics were turned on, and all of a sudden we were good. Yeah. It was amazing. Yeah. We were like, Earl was bang on. Clarence and I back and forth. Jason and I back and forth. Jason and Clarence. It was just, everything just fit. We made mistakes, but we were so much better than we thought we would be. Yeah. And the energy that these guys had, because they were doing the first ever Hockey Night in Canada in another language. Yeah. And it was Cree. Yeah. And it was outstanding. And they were so full of pride. And it was so emotional. Yeah. And the game came, Sportsnet, all the heads of Sportsnet were there watching it. And Clarence was so, he started the game exactly like Foster Hewitt. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen from across the country. And then I said he jumped right into Cree with the same, and it was like bang. Yeah. It was unreal. Yeah. And so we've continued to do it 3 to 6 times a year, and now we're doing it in Inuktitut, and they look at maybe doing it in Algonquin or Ojibwe next year. Yeah. 6 to 8 games, 10 games, depending on what the agreement with Sportsnet is. But it's been outstanding. It's been so much fun, and we've made friendships with not just we're all Indigenous there. The people who are on the show are Indigenous. Mm-hmm. People behind the scenes, cameramen, script writers, highlight guys, highlight people. Graphics, all Indigenous, and they've learned the sport on the fly, and they've learned to do it on the fly, and it's been amazing. Yeah,
I did see. I remember seeing that show in Cree, Hockey Night in Canada, and I remember looking over at my wife, and she's just kind of shocked. She said, "That's the language you speak." I said, "Yeah, they're doing it in Cree." And I was like, holy jeez, they are doing it. Yeah. But it was, you guys did a good job.
Yeah, and we've gotten really comfortable with it. I think we've got We've done a couple live ones right out of Winnipeg Jets Arena, which that
Okay.
time, I don't know what it's called now, but back in the day. So we go there and do the game live. So we've done 3. And the first one it was almost like our first game because our studio was across the street. Everything was coming from our studio to us. We were sitting here literally like you and I with a mic, a small monitor, 2 monitors, one from APTN, one from Sportsnet. And sometimes the sound would go out in our ears, so we wouldn't know. So we would just start talking, and we were flying blind 3/4 of that night. But it didn't sound it. It sounded like it was legitimate because we had done it 15 times before. There, we were flying by the seat of our pants. So this was kind of the same, but a bit different because Clarence had never done a game in an NHL arena before, so he was so excited, and it was so much fun. And it's been a really good experience.
Where's Clarence from?
I want to say Saddle Lake, First Nation, but he might be even a little further north than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
This last question is about reconciliation in Canada. And what are your thoughts on the status of reconciliation? And what do you think are the next steps we must take on this journey?
Yeah, I think that it's nowhere near where it has to be. I think the good thing is that there's more non-Indigenous interested, and they're asking the right questions, and they're doing their own research. Yeah. I think from the original, I can't say original, but from when we started this a number of years ago, where people, when the children's bodies were found, and that kind of kickstarted everything. And a comment was made by a friend of mine who's a really good friend and a business partner. And he said, I just wish that they would find all the bodies at once so we could move forward. Yeah. And I just said, you know how stupid that sounds? You know how racist that sounds? This has been happening to our kids for 100 years, and you're upset that it's taken more than 2 months. And he kind of looked and he goes, that was awful. Yeah. And that's the kind of the conversation that is happening now, though. I find more and more where when it first came out, non-Indigenous wanted to know, but they were afraid to ask. Yeah. And so when I was asked, I'd say, well, I could give you an answer, or Chief Willie Littlechild could give you an answer, Grand Chief Willie Littlechild could give you an answer, but don't you think it would carry more weight if you went to find out yourself? We'll give you the brief synopsis, but if you read about it, then it would carry that much more weight, and you would understand it a little bit better. And I think that's been happening more and more. Like, we're nowhere near. And everybody agrees that. Indigenous, non-Indigenous, we're nowhere near. We're just starting to teach the actual history of Canada now. Right. And there's going to be people always going to deny, because that's how some people are. Yeah. There's always going to be those people in the world that are so self-absorbed that they don't think outside their own little sphere and their own little life. Yeah. But there's also the majority of people, they want to understand and they want to move forward. So I think it's a work in progress. Do I think we're moving forward? Yes. Sometimes do I think we're treading water? Oh yeah, we are. Mm-hmm. That's part of the process also. Yeah. Like people have said, if it's taken you 150 years to get in, it's going to take you 150 years to rectify. Yeah. And so it's not an overnight thing. And as much as we want to push it and see progress, and it's a frustration, I get it. But I know that there's a will out there. Mm-hmm. And there's not the rolling of the eyes that we originally got again, we're going to talk about this. Yeah. There is an understanding that shit has happened that we knew about, that we talk about, that we weren't believed about. Right. And now there's a belief in it, at least now, that wasn't even there 5 years ago. Yeah. So the conversation is a better conversation, but there's a long way to go.
Okay. Awesome. Well said. I've been talking to John Chabot, former NHL hockey player, who lives in Ottawa now, been all over the world doing this thing. Thank you, John, for being here and doing this with us. On behalf of the Legacy of Hope Foundation, I want to thank you for coming out to do this podcast with us. You have any last comments you'd like to make?
I think Legacy of Hope is a pretty good way to look at things. Hope especially. Yeah. I think, I go up, and I tell people this all the time. When I go up north with my first assist, I very rarely leave without hope in my heart. Mm-hmm. For a number of reasons. One being these kids have lights in their eyes, and they're willing to learn, they're willing to listen, they're willing to work hard. And I find that is happening more in the south of our country than 10 years ago, that our kids are being reached at a younger age. They're being, they understand there's more for them than what was there for their parents. Yeah. And I think that if there's one thing that we can take from anything that we're doing, there is hope. There is a light that maybe wasn't as bright, or maybe not even there 15, 20 years ago, that is now starting to be lit and starting to get stronger.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Thank you, God. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you.
All right. See you much.
Roots and Hoots is a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For episode show notes, please visit the podcast description and make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. For more information about the work we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.